what is a way to figure out whether somebody is full of it or whether you're on the right path or whatever. And a lot of times when you're listening to somebody, if that person can explain it to you simply, then they probably know what they're doing. If you say, well, which one should I do? And they're like, well, so, and then they start, and the next thing you know, they've got a system diagram and they're trying to see it. And it's like, now can't you see that I am really an expert? And you'd be like, yeah, you're not.
Welcome to the Customer Commerce Podcast, where technology's fast and biz is a blast.
In life and in business, time is precious. It's why customers stay or leave and why businesses succeed or fail. We're here to give a voice to everything that makes business, whether as a customer or as a CEO, easier and more rewarding. Welcome to the Customer Commerce Podcast. Let's dive in. Welcome, ladies and gents. We are joined with a very special guest this episode, and we've got like a little, I don't know, this is, I feel like this is going to be a very high energy, impactful, packed little episode. And I'm going to actually let our guest introduce himself because he is a bit of a tech whiz and I'm not. So I think people that know tech should really, speak in the language, but simplified. And I'm just going to pass the mic straight over to Tad Reeves. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. So, I'm Tad. So as for work, I'm a principal architect at a agency called Arbory Digital. What I do and what I focus on, I'm a systems architect, basically. And the types of systems that I focus on are large. It's basically implementations of large websites for large brands. These are typically not the e-commerce side of things, but the rest of the corporate website. So if you take any large brand, and every large brand has their own bespoke, custom things that they need to have online to support their business, to support their customer base. And they're all different. They all have a huge different set of problems. If you take like a big brand like Food Network or something like that, right? They have their set of problems, which is they've got lots and lots of videos all over the place and a bazillion recipes that all need to be searchable. They all need to have excellent search engine optimization. They need to be findable with on-site search. You've got videos galore and all that sort of stuff. You have that problem, right? A software company might have a completely separate problem, which is like they've been like, especially an old software company. You might have versions dating back to like 1989 that you have to have PDF documentation for in 10 languages. And somehow you need to keep track of that and store it and update it and so forth. Have people be able to download license files and, business to business is very different than business to consumer, what those flows are and so forth. But by and large, you're dealing with huge bunches of content of different sorts. And that gets corralled with a system that's generally known as a content management system. There's little ones for littler sites. If you're a dentist or something like that, you just have a couple pages that says, "Hi, I'm Dr. Smith, and I'd love to work on your teeth, and I'm friendly, and please come by." So you have something like that, that's very small, and you could have something like a WordPress or something like that that's free that you could work on. Then you have very, very large ones where you have a company that is, they're multinational. They have to have separate stuff has to be stored separately for China and stored separately for Switzerland or something like that. It's in lots of different languages. You have authors all over the place who are putting in content. They have a completely different set of problems. But that's my job, is to come up with solutions for all those different sets of problems. And those big boy ones, those ones are generally are very large. Those are implementations that when you start on them, you're just even doing an upgrade sometimes is like, 6 months to a year just to go and confront all the weirdnesses that go on with that. But, that's what I'm doing, yeah.
Because this is the Customer Commerce Podcast. And obviously, I think people reduce down the idea of commerce to be capturing that credit card right at the end of the process. And a lot of the things that we talk about in this podcast is that flow of actually making the transaction or making the sale is obviously important and it obviously needs to work, but it's only like a fifth of that relationship. And if you don't have the information easy to hand, if you don't especially with customers now wanting to go and do their own research and they're very, very switched on. Do you find your clients are are looking to how can we enable our customers more? Is that a theme and a thread that's happening with your side of the business?
Sometimes they need to be guided in that direction.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't know. Sometimes they know that what they have is bad. They know the various crusty ways that they're like, okay, it's slow to do everything. It costs too much to do anything. And we feel like we could reach a lot more. And that is the other thing about a marketing website is that, and I'll bet you find this with commerce type stuff too, is that you get a lot of like tip of the spear type people who are like, okay, this isn't the email system. This isn't the, some back end router. This isn't the, corporate guest Wi-Fi or something like that. It's like, nobody's going to say, well, the reason for our success in Q1 was the guest Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
like
right.
That's never going to happen. Right. But if you say, okay, well, what if we got this right? Our income's here. It could be like right here if we like really nail this. Right. So there is a lot of attention, a lot of like jazzy folks or people who would like to be jazzy again, but sometimes it can be beaten down. But your question though on customer commerce, like what does that mean is like so different for different people. So I'm traveling right now. The customer I'm going to see is a big video game company, and they do commerce. They obviously sell their video games. They have a couple of the largest and most well-known video game franchises of all time. They don't sell anything on their website.
Yeah.
All of it's through things like Xbox and
Stream
and
and
PlayStation,
Steam,
and all that sort of stuff. There's all these third-party things. Got a commerce setup that transacts no money, but they make a lot of money. So that's one type of thing, right? And then I've got another one coming in a week and a half right afterwards, where it's another gigantic software company that also transacts absolutely nothing on their website because it's all B2B. It's all very, very large. It's big software that's sold to big companies. They don't take a single credit card on their website. But if they get their website wrong, then they're going to lose their shirts. So it's
I mean, I was just in the market for a washing machine and dishwasher because we just not dishwasher, washing machine and dryer because we just moved house and the old ones wouldn't fit in the new spots. And it's like, well, I mean, we need to get them. And it was really funny because when I was doing the research on it, on what to buy, there were 3 brands that made it hard for me to download their manual.
Yeah.
I had to know the exact whatevers and had to jump through 7 pages of very slow loading websites. And by the time I didn't bother, like those 4 or 5 brands just lost, a $2,000 or $3,000 sale because I couldn't download the manual. It just wasn't available on their website. There were marketing websites that let me download it. And then if I paid a fee, I could get the full manual. And it's like, what universe are you on?
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're talking about giant companies here. When it comes to small businesses, like what you've just been describing makes sense. But then I'm like, gosh, if I was a small business, I'd be like, oh, it's going to be impossible for my site to be this shiny, even just a smooth, flow with my customers because it takes that level of expertise or, someone like you couldn't work with someone as small as me. Do you have a variety of clientele? Like, can small businesses afford to work with people like you? What's that?
So
can afford a good website. Actually, it might actually be the opposite of that in that the reason Tad needs to work with these large companies is because of their complexity, and a small business might be easier. I don't know, Tad, what do you think?
It is a little bit of that. It is a little bit of that. I think the simple nature of a local website, right? If you get a local hardware store or something like that, or I watched one of your podcasts, the fellow with the plumbing supply place, right? So you take something like that, and it is a simpler set of problems than somebody who you've got authors in 4 places, and their stuff needs to be translated, and you've got workflows, and you've got or let's say you take like an insurance company or something like that. They've got these crazy requirements of like every single thing that you put online has to be snapshotted and saved for X number of years, depending on the state. And it's all these like bonkers requirements that you're like, okay, good. Yeah, this is not something the dentist down the street has to deal with, and you have to get that stuff right also. And then also there's the no dentist is going to go out of business if his website is offline for a couple hours or something like that. Like it's just not a significant part of their business. But if you're like Marriott or something like that, you're losing, $1 million a minute basically when that site's down. So it does require a different set of folks solving a different set of problems who are, spinning their wheels for a while on things like redundancy. Okay, well, what happens if, AWS usually doesn't go down, example, Amazon Web Services. It's a, gigantic cloud provider. But what if it does? Are you,
And it has.
Yeah. Right? And it has. It totally has. So are you prepared or is your website making that much money for you that you should pay a couple of engineers for 6 months to figure out a multi-cloud solution so that when it goes down, you can flip over to the other one or something like that?
I think that's a key point that you're making there, Tad, is that a lot of small businesses and even medium enterprise businesses sometimes get caught up in, is this solution we're looking at multi-cloud or multi-platform or 10 layers of redundancy to here and hell and back? And they lose sight of the fact that, well, does it matter? Like, is your business, is your website going offline for an hour? How much is that actually going to cost your business? And if the answer's not 100 times what it would cost to build the redundancy in place, well, is it really worth it? Like, because when you add all those layers of redundancy, you're adding management, you're adding, oversight. You have to have an IT team to monitor it, or at least you need to have a team to know the right people to call when that site goes down. And are you drilling the fact that site is going down every month or two, so you even know how to enable the redundancies if there is any manual process? And there's a lot of stuff there. Jess,
Can you break down the redundancy part? I've never heard of that.
Redundancy physically means that there's more than one copy of something. Redundant is where I say something again.
Right.
That's it's like it's more than you need for any given thing.
So like if you have to take your kid to school every day and you've got one car, redundancy would be having two cars out the front.
That's right.
Right. So then in relation to tech into websites, you're saying like double of pages or...
Well, what you're saying is, so let's just say you have a system that holds all the pages for your site and a system that also processes forms so that when, Sally in Iowa says, oh, I'm very interested in your service, and goes and fills it out. And that goes back to this database thing, which goes back to Salesforce or something like that. Right. So you have gear, like it's actually computers that are doing all that sort of thing. Right. But what happens if, let's say you've got 3 of them just to, take the load of everything happening. Right. And let's just say those 3 things. And let's say you've got some guy who says, oh, I've got this new idea for some cool code that's going to make it flashier. It's going to turn it all purple when the guy, and I think it's going to be great. He puts it on there and it all shuts down.
It breaks everything.
It's all broken. Right. So they're all down. So your website's down. What's your contingency there? So should you have another copy of it that's running and taking traffic and still processing everything like that while somebody is making the updates or something like that? That would be, that's redundancy. You have more than
imagine like a hotel chain like Marriott, as Tad was saying, if you can't make a booking on the website, how many millions of dollars are they losing every minute or hour, right? So how do you build that redundancy? And if a plumber, speaking to Beyond Plumbing's example, if a plumber goes to the website and they can't place an order then and there, well, either they'll go to another website and place the order, in which case Beyond Plumbing loses that revenue for that little half hour, or they'll just come back in an hour and do it. Like it doesn't require that level of, well, we need 7 copies of this thing running, because it's just not critical to that level. It's important. It's not important. Like, you don't want to be late for school, but no one's going to die over it, and you're not going to trash the company over it. So I think with small businesses, when you hear, and I see this a lot in software actually, Tad, and you could probably speak to this as well, people, especially tech savvy people, see the new shiny thing and go, oh, we need to do everything like that. Facebook say that they build their site and systems in this method, so therefore we should, if we want to be like Facebook. Well, actually, it's the other way around. That Facebook didn't become or LinkedIn or Netflix. They didn't become these behemoths by implementing these really complex technologies. They became the behemoths and then implemented the technology to manage it, right? It wasn't
Right.
the technology wasn't the cause of that effect. And I think that's a key thing for small businesses.
And you've got another end of that too, which is, so you've got someone deciding that they're going to make their business really big, right? And you never want to knock anybody who's got grand ideas for how something is going to like go big, right? And then there's delusions of grandeur where you're like, this thing is going to be as popular as Facebook. So I need to engineer this thing to be able to take 500 million people concurrently.
And we've got 10 people on the site right now.
Right, and there's 10. And okay, do you have a plan to introduce this to this many people? Do you have a way that you think that this might come to pass? Like, so you need to, because that over engineering you can lose your shirt over that, and that is something that a lot of people, a trap. I mean, to Michael's point, that there's a trap that you get into of like, well, this is shiny, and I've heard that you should do all this cloud, this and that, and make all this gear that does all these things, and I could run a Super Bowl ad right now, and I could take this traffic. Are you going to run a Super Bowl ad? Like so. And now, that being said, there's also, and this comes back to the job of the architect too, because at the same time, you don't want to poo-poo somebody's idea too. Like you say, well, what if you have what problem you're trying to solve? Is it possible that you could run a lot, get a lot of traffic? Are you planning on possibly a big time ad campaign or something like that? Let's engineer around that. And there are possible solutions to be able to solve the big and little of this and that. And to me, that's part of the fun of the whole thing, because it's not cookie cutter. It's not one thing. It's lots of things. And it's funny because people like the Food Network, that was actually one of the sites that I worked on once, and people are like, oh, I love the Food Network, I love that, and they start talking to me about recipes and videos and stuff. I'm like, dude, I don't do that. But so when it was Thanksgiving and it was turkey time, you search the word turkey, which we had the number 1, 2, 3, and 5 results for like turkey. We just searched the word turkey, and I'm like, good. So remember how when you went there, you saw the site? That was me. Yeah. See how you didn't get an error? I did that. So
yeah.
What would you say, Tad? Sorry to upset Jessica if you had a similar question, but what would you say to small to medium businesses that are looking to handle content? Like, what are the traps that someone could get into and avoid?
Well, okay, so having a little bit of foresight, because that's the thing. You've got to, and this is where sometimes you do want to talk to somebody who's got a clue and get some idea of what you could build on so that you don't paint yourself into a corner. Because that is one thing. You could say, all right, so I want to do these things, and as soon as you've got a business and it's a running concern, you're gonna put some effort into your online presence and make sure that it works. And that's going to cost money. So you're going to pay consultants and stuff like that to do that sort of thing. You're probably not going to internalize all that. Or you might, who knows, maybe you've got a bunch of nerds and you could just do it. And maybe that's the right call too. Because sometimes that is how a lot of businesses do it. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it, Michael, like you get some guy, and then his son happens to be a developer, and he's like, good, rock and roll. Just do it, and for a certain size of company, don't pay it. Don't pay somebody. But as soon as you're of a certain size, then it makes sense to start confronting that. And that's where you start looking at requirements of what you want to do, what's happening now, and then what are your like medium-term business goals? Like, not your like, eventually I'm going to retire because this is going to be, I'm going to like, not that, like what are the medium-term things that you can foresee are going to happen that you should design for right now? And then you could start making a thing around that. And that's a lot of what I end up spending a lot of my time on too, is doing these kind of discovery type projects where I'm just come in and just talk to everybody and say, well, what are you trying to do? And the next thing you pull these people out that are like, oh, that was a hard requirement. If we'd gone to this system that you wanted to do, you would have been checkmated. You can't do that. Like somebody was like, oh yeah, the CEO wants me to do 4K video. We're like, oh, well, that system that you're doing doesn't do 4K video. So now what are we going to do? Like, so you pull those requirements out and you say which ones are got to have it and which ones are not. And then you figure out what your budget is, and then somewhere in the middle you can figure out what you're going to be doing.
And on that, like if you're working with a client that doesn't know anything about this world, I know if I was in that position, I'd be like, I don't know. What do you think? And then I guess if you're with kind of maybe not a super honest person, like you definitely want to talk to everyone, right? So how do you know, what would be your advice to those who, what would your advice be, or the questions that you would recommend people, small business owners, ask or find out about, that so that they don't get lost in, you know, the tech jargon and of like, oh, I guess we need that, and they have no idea.
Well, okay. So first of all, to be 100% transparent, I deal very little with small businesses. So,
Okay.
so in terms of what is the full set of things that are available to what are all the tools that are available to small businesses these days? I'm not going to call myself an expert on that because I deal mostly with the larger ones. So, and there are just tons of tools out there right now, and a lot of them are point and click. A lot of them you can do without a ton of, you know, developer, like all your WordPresses and Wixes and Shopify's out there and stuff like that. You can
And still connects.
yeah, it still connects. You can do that without a ton of
Sorry.
developer expertise, and then but then there's going to come a point where somebody says, yeah, it'd be great, but I just want it to do this, and then next thing you know, you're bigger. So yeah. But then again, I didn't answer your question just then. But
Well, it's
but
an
I guess
honest answer.
it is, yeah. But I guess if
Maybe
anything,
it is. You just don't need to worry about it until you get to a certain size.
yeah. And then
Okay.
I mean, what would that size be? Like, are we talking? It's probably more around. You don't really need to. If you're a small business and you're growing, from what I'm hearing from you, Tad, is it more like do what is expedient right now to get you up and running and start getting income in, and then once your website starts making you significant percentage of your income and it's now worth $1 million a year to you or something, or 2 million, then maybe it's time to look at, well, what are you going to do? And in the meantime, choose a platform that can scale, you know, like, you know, Shopify, Store Connect, whatever, and grow from there. And you can actually take that decision, and it can be one of the few decisions as a small business owner that you can just punt down the line a bit, which is actually a relief to a lot of business owners.
Yep, I actually very much agree with that. The other thing that I think that you can use as a little bit of a barometer on this is comes down to personnel, because there are some really, really sexy marketing, you know, mega things that do all this bonkers AI stuff to then go and check your campaigns and manage the thises and that's and suggest different content variations that you're going to go and roll out to these different locale, like all this stuff, right? And you go and you sit in a presentation, you're like, wow, that's cool. And then you go, who's going to operate that?
Yeah.
And so that's, to me, that is the stumbling block right there. Is a lot of times, sometimes you might have an IT organization. You have people who are, you know, somebody who's physically maintaining the website and so forth. But then you don't have more than, like, maybe your marketing guy is also, you know, he takes off his marketing hat and throws on the SEO hat. And then now he's doing, you know, he's processing order. Now he's filling orders. He's sticking UPS stickers on stuff and shit. Like, is that you're not ready to go for some big enterprise grade, you know, super Megatron system that does all this stuff.
You don't have the team to run it.
You don't have the team to run it. You will. A company like Adobe will absolutely sell you that, and then you will be out, you know, whatever, $100,000, and you won't actually use it. It won't actually make you that money. But if you've got people who are there going, I feel like I'm a caveman trying to get stuff done in a social media world, like, what should I run? Then you're like, okay, good. Then you can start saying, good. Well, with a team of this size and a budget of this size, then tools like this are available now, and then you can start, you know, picking those.
Love that. I just heard business owners on the other end go, well, I love that. I want to end, we're going to end in a few minutes, but I want to move the conversation slightly to, I think, a mutual hobby of you both, because you're both you know, majority of the time, I assume you're head into coding and the implementation and just lots of words and
Yes.
screens, right?
Oh, yes.
But you both very much enjoy the outdoors. And
Yes.
Tad, I met you on LinkedIn because you watched one of our podcasts, and then you loved our conversation then, which was more about the entrepreneurship of basically maintaining your workflow and how you stay productive and positive and just, you know, on top of the world kind of thing. And I was semi-stalking you, and I noticed that you've started doing podcasts whilst you're riding your bike, like on a full mountain bike in the middle of a forest. There's a camera on where you're going, and then there's a camera on yourself. Have you seen this, Michael?
I saw a little brief part of it. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
I've never seen anything like that. And so I want to just
Way to
quickly
differentiate yourself. Good job.
right? I know we need to
Nobody
up
else is
that,
doing it.
Michael. How are we
Yeah.
going to do that?
I didn't know if there was
We need to go
demand
skydiving.
for bike riding podcasts, but I'm definitely I'm in a field of one right now. So yeah.
It's great, but I want to know, like, how does that help you? How does that help with this part of life and mentally? Obviously, physically, there's lots of benefits, but mentally, how does that help you?
Well, so yeah, so I mean, definitely physically, because historically, IT, specifically like sysadmins, that was what I started out as a sysadmin, is one of the deadliest professions. People just drop dead because they are so sedentary and they spend so long in front. They're so sleep deprived,
Wow.
especially people who are on call, that they just tend to run their bodies down and then have heart problems and die. So I decided very early on that was not going to be my fate. So that's one thing. But number two, the biggest thing to me is you got to separate yourself out of problems. Because sometimes, especially when you're dealing with a technical problem, you have all these significances and things going around in your head. And how will I do this? And how will I, again, they're trying to do, and then why doesn't this work? And all that kind of stuff. And you're sitting there with all this like stuck on you. And the number of times that I have solved a problem 10 minutes into a bike ride is a lot. And it's so just getting the space, getting the air in the lungs, moving the body, and then suddenly it's like, oh yeah, that's right. And then it's solved. So to me, it is not only just trying to keep myself healthy, but it's also just being outside, seeing things that are farther away than your screen, things like that. It genuinely helps. And it's funny because I thought this was like my private secret or something like that. But then this was, the more I talk to people, it's like we just pulled on another developer, and he's fabulous, but he also mountain bikes. And I'm like, oh yeah. So so do you ever just take off and then just solve a problem? He's like, yeah. And then I have to finish my ride really fast before the solution goes away because I solve it while I'm on my ride.
Wow.
But it definitely helps. It's a huge part of just staying sane when you got stuff like that happening.
You know, there's an interesting thing I just read that exercise and moving the body is the most mentally strenuous thing you can do. So, like, you use your mind and brain and nervous system use way more energy just by going for a jog than playing a game of chess for 4 hours.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's mind-blowing that movement exercises the mind. It's not just exercising the body, you're exercising the mind and getting that whole activity going and things flowing. And yeah, I do the same thing with running.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm really pissed at something, I'll just go for a walk and, and then halfway through go for a bit of a jog. And by that point, I'm like, okay, well, that wasn't so bad. Now, how do we solve it? And then by the time I get home, I've got a solution, and then you go from there. It's great.
Oh yeah. It's the mountain biking with the occasional threats of death. Also,
That'll wake you up, that's for sure.
It'll wake you up. It'll wake you
I
up.
use
But,
that with Sydney traffic, so it's all good.
okay. There you go.
All right.
All right.
Well, are there any one last word of advice, Tad, for those in the world?
So I guess if there's any other word of advice, and this may be a platitude, but I think because you're talking about how do you pick how do you find out what you should be doing? What is a way to figure out whether somebody is full of it or whether you're on the right path or whatever? And a lot of times when you're listening to somebody, if that person can explain it to you simply, then they probably know what they're doing. If you say, well, which one should I do? And they're like, well, so, and then they start, and the next thing you know, they've got a system diagram and they're trying to see it. And they're like, now can't you see that I'm really an expert? And you'd be like, yeah, you're not. So that would be my advice. If the person can explain it to you simply, then they're all right.
Love it. Tad Reeves, thank you so much for joining us on the Customer Commerce Podcast. Have a beautiful night, guys. And listeners, we'll see you next week.
See ya.
Right.
Thanks, Tad.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you had an awesome time, leaving you with ideas on how to improve your business and wow customers. If you'd like to leave a real customer's story, head to the link in our show notes and cuss away. Love the show? Please subscribe and leave a review, because that enables us to help more businesses in building real relationships with customers and grow more rapidly. See you next time.